Full horror story, gift for horror lovers. She is here. The night Elias disappeared was just like any other. The sky was clear, the moon bright, and a gentle wind whispered through the valley. The villagers had finished their evening meals, and the glow of lanterns flickered in their homes. Laughter drifted from the tavern where men shared stories and drank away the burdens of the day. Elias, a well-liked and hard-working farmer, stood at the edge of his land, staring at the dark outline of the hollow forest. His wife, Sarah, had reminded him to bring in firewood before nightfall. He had smiled, kissed her forehead, and promised to return soon. He never did. When dawn arrived and Elias had still not come home, Sarah panicked. She rushed to the village square, screaming his name. Soon neighbors gathered, hunters, blacksmiths, and farmers, all prepared to search. They moved through the valley in groups, calling his name, looking for any sign of him. An unease settled over them. Then, near the hollow forest's edge, they found something. Elias's axe lay abandoned, its handle splintered as if he had struck something, or someone violently. The ground was disturbed, covered in claw-like marks, leading into the trees. A trail of blood stretched deep into the forest, the droplets growing larger as they went. The men hesitated. No one wanted to go further. But one of them, Gregor, the village priest, took a step forward. That's when they saw the tree. It was an old oak, gnarled and massive, its trunk thick enough to require 3 men to wrap their arms around it. Carved deep into its bark in letters too jagged, too unnatural to be human, was a single message. She is here. The words dripped with fresh blood. That night Sarah did not sleep. She sat on the porch, her eyes fixed on the road, waiting, praying. The villagers had found no body, and a part of her clung to hope. Maybe Elias was injured, maybe he had just gotten lost and would find his way home. Then sometime in the early morning she saw him. A shadowed figure walked up the dirt path toward the house. Her heart leapt. She ran forward, calling out, "Elias?" But as the figure stepped into the moonlight, her breath froze in her throat. It was Elias, or what was left of him. His skin was pale, too pale, as if all the blood had been drained from his body. His clothes were torn and his feet were bare and covered in mud. And then she saw his face. His eyes were gone, 2 gaping black sockets stared at her. His lips had been sewn shut with thick black thread. Sarah's scream ripped through the night, but Elias did not move. He simply stood there, his head tilting slightly, as if he were listening to something only he could hear. Then with a slow, mechanical movement, he raised his hand. He pointed at her, and then he collapsed, like a puppet whose strings had just been cut. Sarah ran into the night, screaming. She was never seen again. The next morning, the villagers gathered at Elias's home. Father Gregor examined the body. "Elias is dead," he said grimly. "He was dead long before he walked here last night." A chill ran through the crowd. "But how is that possible?" someone whispered. No one had an answer. But as they lifted Elias's cold, lifeless form, a single slip of parchment fell from his pocket. Father Gregor bent down, picking it up carefully. There was writing, not his. Just 4 words written in a shaking, frantic hand. "Do not follow me!" But the witch had only just begun. The death of Elias had shaken Hollow Valley, but the village had not yet abandoned hope. The people still clung to the idea that whatever had happened to him was an isolated incident, a cruel trick of fate. Then the twins vanished, and hope died. Disappearance. Daniel and Matthew were 6 years old, playful, full of mischief, and always inseparable. Their mother, Anne, adored them, and every night she would tuck them into bed, whispering a lullaby passed down through generations. "Close your eyes, my darlings true. Moonlight watches over you. Rest until the morning bright, safe within the arms of night." But that night, as Anne finished the last verse, she felt something strange. The air inside the room had turned cold. The candle by the bedside flickered, the flame shrinking as if something unseen had breathed upon it. A shiver ran through her. Shaking the feeling away, she kissed the twins goodnight, closing their door gently. The next morning, they were gone. Anne awoke to silence. Normally, the boys would be up before dawn, their laughter echoing through the house. But that morning, the house was still. Too still. She entered their room, expecting to find them curled up beneath their blankets. Instead, she found the window wide open, though it had been locked the night before. The blankets lay perfectly undisturbed, as if the boys had simply vanished into thin air. Panic set in. Anne screamed their names, running barefoot into the streets. Within minutes, the entire village was awake, gathering outside her house. The search party formed quickly. They scoured every house, every barn, every field. Nothing. Then near the old church, someone found something. 2 sets of tiny footprints leading toward the graveyard, and another set of prints alongside them. Prints that were not human. By the time the search party reached the graveyard, dawn was breaking. A thick fog rolled across the land, curling around the crooked tombstones like ghostly fingers. Father Gregor, leading the way, froze mid-step. His face turned ashen. "Dear God, no," he whispered. The villagers followed his gaze and screamed. Hanging from the ancient oak tree in the churchyard were Daniel and Matthew. Their small bodies were suspended by ropes woven from blackened hair, their faces frozen in terror. Their hands had been sewn together at the chest, stitched with the same thick black thread found on Elias. Their tiny lips were parted as if they had tried to scream, but no sound had escaped, and carved deep into their skin, dripping with fresh blood, was a symbol. The witch's mark, a sign that she had claimed them. Anne collapsed, letting out a wail so raw, so filled with pain, that even the strongest men in the village shuddered. "We should take them down," one of the hunters said, his voice shaking. "No," Father Gregor whispered. "Look beneath them." The villagers peered at the ground. Beneath the boys, scratched into the dirt with ragged fingernails, were words. The message was not written by the witch. It was from the twins. "She sings to us, she calls our names, she lives under the church." A collective shudder rippled through the crowd. The church had been abandoned for decades. No one dared go inside. But now they had no choice, because whatever haunted Hollow Valley wasn't done yet, and the witch was just getting started. She sat in her home, clutching a piece of Daniel's blanket, her mind broken. She whispered their lullaby over and over, rocking back and forth as if the words could bring them back. "Close your eyes, my darlings true. Moonlight watches over you." Her voice cracked. Then the candle on her table flickered. A wind whispered through the room, and from the darkness 2 small voices sang the lullaby back to her. Anne's scream echoed into the night. By morning she was gone too. Hollow Valley was drowning in terror, and the whispers were getting louder. The villagers of Hollow Valley had always avoided the old church, but few knew why. It had stood at the highest point of the valley for centuries, its towering spire once a beacon of faith. But now it was nothing more than a rotting husk, its doors chained shut, its windows shattered, and its walls stained with the creeping touch of time. The villagers never spoke of it. But the elders remembered, and they whispered the truth only in hushed voices. Long before Hollow Valley became a village, the land was wild and untamed. The earliest settlers were devout, and to ensure their safety they built a church atop the highest hill. But what they did not know was that the hill was already claimed. Beneath the earth, buried under centuries of rock and soil, lay something ancient, something hungry, and the church in its righteous glory had been built directly above its prison. For a time all was well. The church flourished, the valley prospered. But then the disappearances began. First it was livestock, sheep found flayed open, their eyes missing, their bodies twisted into unnatural shapes. Then it was children. One by one they vanished, their rooms left undisturbed, their footprints leading nowhere. Panic spread. The villagers prayed harder, their desperation thick in the air. But the prayers fell on deaf ears, because the thing beneath the church was awakening. One fateful night, the bells of the church tolled on their own. The villagers rushed to the hill, torches in hand, fear in their hearts. Inside they found Father Aldrich, the village priest, standing alone before the altar, his face pale and drenched in sweat. His hands trembled, his eyes were wide with horror. "We have made a grave mistake," he whispered. "She is awake." The villagers stared at him confused. Then they noticed the floor. The stone beneath the altar was cracked, and from the fissures a thick, black liquid oozed upward, moving, pulsing, alive. The witch had returned. Before the villagers could react, the church doors slammed shut on their own. The candles flickered, the shadows twisted unnaturally, and then the screaming began. Darkness swallowed the church, and from the void she stepped forward. The witch of Hollow Valley. She was tall, her limbs too long, her fingers ending in claws. Her face was a hollow mask, her eyes empty voids that devoured light. The villagers fell to their knees, begging, praying, weeping, but prayers could not save them now. The witch whispered, her voice like the wind through dead trees. You built this temple over my tomb. You thought faith could bury me? Fool, I was never dead. With a wave of her hand, the torches burst into black fire. The church shook. The walls cracked and the screams of lost souls echoed from below. The villagers fled in terror, but Father Aldrich stood his ground. He clutched a holy relic, its golden surface glowing with divine power. With his final breath, he thrust it into the altar, sealing the cracks, trapping the witch beneath the church once more. The villagers escaped, but Aldrich did not. His final words echoed in the wind. Do not return here. Do not wake her again. The next morning, they chained the doors shut, leaving the church to rot. And they never spoke of it again. Witch's revenge. For decades, the valley was silent, but now the twins' bodies had been found beneath the oak tree, and with them the words, "She lives under the church." The villagers knew what it meant. Someone or something had awakened her again, and this time there would be no priest to stop her. The message left by the twins, "She lives under the church," shook the villagers to their core. They had spent generations avoiding the old church, keeping its doors chained and forgotten. But now, the horror that had been buried beneath it had awakened once more. There was only one choice. They had to return. Gathering. That night, a council gathered in the village square. The elders, those who still remembered the night of screams, stood among the hunters, blacksmiths, and farmers, their faces pale, their voices filled with fear and urgency. Father Gregor, the valley's current priest, spoke first. The witch was sealed beneath the altar long ago, but the twins' message proves the seal has weakened. If we do nothing, she will not stop until every soul in Hollow Valley is taken. A murmur of unease swept through the crowd. How do we kill her? Asked Edwin, the village blacksmith. A heavy silence followed. We don't, Father Gregor admitted, we cannot. But perhaps we can trap her again before it's too late. A dozen men volunteered to enter the church. Armed with torches, iron blades, and relics of faith, they marched toward the hill, their footsteps heavy with dread. The old church waited for them. And something inside was already listening, the seal. The church stood as it always had, a corpse of stone, its once proud structure now a ruin. The wooden doors were chained shut, rusted locks holding them in place. Gregor raised his lantern. This place was sealed for a reason, he murmured, and we are about to undo it. Crack! With a heavy swing of his hammer, Edwin shattered the lock. The chains rattled to the ground, and the doors, as if breathing, slowly swung open. A wave of cold, damp air swept over them, and from within the darkness a whisper curled through the air. You shouldn't have come. The men steeled themselves and stepped inside. Church of the Damned. The interior was deadly silent. The wooden pews lay rotting, the walls covered in cobwebs and forgotten prayers. But what unnerved them most was the altar. It had cracked open. The floor beneath it, once solid stone, now revealed a gaping hole, leading into utter darkness. The catacomb, Gregor whispered. She was buried below, but something has opened the way. Then that's where we must go, said Edwin. The men descended, torches held high. One by one, they climbed into the abyss, stepping onto a spiral staircase of cold stone. And the deeper they went, the more they heard her. I remember you. The whisper slithered through the air, echoing off the stone walls. Your ancestors buried me here. They thought their prayers could hold me. But faith is so fragile. The torches flickered violently. A gust of wind from nowhere swept past them, carrying with it the scent of blood and decay. The tunnel ended in a massive chamber, and what they saw inside stole the breath from their lungs. In the center of the cavern stood a stone coffin, its lid cracked and open, and hanging from the walls, strung up like puppets on invisible strings, were the missing villagers. Elias, Anna, and the twins. Their bodies dangled limply, their faces contorted in agony, their eyes black and empty. Gregor fell to his knees. Dear God. Then the coffin lid slid away, and she rose. Witch awakens. The witch unfolded herself from the coffin, her skeletal frame stretching, her fingers cracking as she reached for them. Her face, if it could be called that, was featureless except for a wide, grinning mouth filled with teeth too long and too sharp. Her hollow sockets turned toward the men. She laughed. Did you think iron and stone could hold me forever? She whispered. Then with unnatural speed she moved. The witch lunged forward, her clawed hands grabbing one of the men. He screamed, his skin turning gray and brittle, his body shriveling in seconds. Gregor raised his relic, a silver cross, and thrust it forward. The witch shrieked, recoiling as the artifact burned her flesh. "She can be hurt," Gregor yelled. "Use the relics." The men surrounded her, holding up blades, crosses, and iron symbols of faith, but the witch only smiled. "You cannot kill me," she whispered, "but I can take you with me." The ground trembled. The chamber began to collapse. Gregor realized the truth. The witch was bound to this place, her power was strong here. But if the chamber was buried once more, they could trap her again. "Get to the stairs," he ordered. The men rushed toward the exit, dodging falling debris. Gregor stayed behind. With one final prayer, he threw his relic into the coffin, into her tomb, and tore a torch from the wall. Then, with a shaking hand, he lit the cavern on fire. Flames roared. The witch screamed, not in pain but in fury. The walls collapsed, sealing the tomb, and with it, her eternal prison. By the time the men emerged from the church, dawn was breaking. The ground beneath the hill had caved in, swallowing the ruins of the church forever. The witch was trapped once more. For now, Gregor turned to the valley, his face grim. "We have won today," he said, "but one day the seal will weaken again, and when it does, we must be ready." The villagers nodded, and in the distance, carried by the wind, they swore they heard her whisper, "This is not over." The witch was not always a monster. Once she had a name. Once she was human. And once she was loved. Long before Hollow Valley was a village, before the church was ever built, there was Aldara. She lived in a time when the world was wilder, when the forests stretched endlessly and men still feared the unknown. Aldara was a healer, gifted in the ways of herbs and nature. She was beautiful, with long dark hair and piercing green eyes, and many in the valley whispered that she had powers beyond mortal understanding. Some called her a wise woman. Others called her a witch, but in the end it was love that doomed her. Aldara fell in love with a man named Edric, a hunter who often came to her for remedies and charms. He was strong and kind, and for the first time in her life Aldara trusted someone. But their love was not meant to last, for Edric was already promised to another, the daughter of a priest, a woman of noble blood. When the priest learned of Aldara's affair with Edric, he was furious. "She is a temptress, a corrupter of men," he declared, and the people, already fearful of her powers, believed him. One night the priest led a mob to Aldara's cottage. They dragged her into the village square, their faces twisted with hate and fear. "You have bewitched a man of God's family," the priest spat. "For this sin you will be purified by fire." Aldara begged for mercy. She called for Edric, but he did not come. He had chosen silence. Betrayed and heartbroken, Aldara was bound to a stake. The villagers lit the fire beneath her feet. As the flames rose, she screamed, not in pain but in rage. "If you would make me a monster," she cursed them, "then a monster I shall be." With her final breath, she whispered words in a language older than time itself, words of vengeance, words of power, and then she burned. For 3 days the valley was silent. Then on the third night the ground split open where Aldara had died. And she crawled out. Her skin was now ashen, her eyes hollow voids, her flesh forever marked by fire. She was no longer human. She was the witch of Hollow Valley, and she was hungry for revenge. The night Aldara returned, the priest was found hanging from the church bell tower, his body twisted and broken. The hunters who had helped burn her vanished, their houses left untouched, their belongings undisturbed, as if they had simply ceased to exist. And Edric was found at the edge of the valley, his body reduced to nothing but bones, his skull grinning in eternal horror. The people fled, and soon the valley was left empty, save for one structure, the church standing over her grave. A prison, built to contain the horror they had created. But Hollow Valley was not abandoned forever. Years passed, generations forgot, and new settlers came. They built homes, they lived their lives. And then, the church doors opened on their own, and the disappearances began again. Back in the present day, after sealing the witch beneath the ruins once more, Father Gregor gathered the village. The church was never meant to be a place of faith, he admitted. It was built as a prison, and we have been its keepers. But the seal will weaken again, one of the men murmured. It always does. Gregor nodded. And next time we must be ready. But in the wind a whisper lingered. You cannot keep me buried forever. For centuries the villagers of Hollow Valley had feared the curse of Aldara, but unknown to most, There were some among them who did not run. There were those who remembered the truth and vowed to keep watch. They called themselves the keepers of the forgotten oath. They were not priests. They were not warriors. They were the last line of defense. And they knew that one day the seal would break again. That day was now. After the witch had been sealed beneath the ruins once more, Father Gregor did not sleep. Instead, he took the surviving men from the church and led them deep into the forest. There, hidden beneath the roots of an ancient oak, was a door of stone, marked with symbols older than the valley itself. Edwin, the blacksmith, hesitated. "I never knew this place existed," he murmured. Gregor placed a weathered hand on the stone and whispered, "By fire and shadow, by blood and bone, and we remember." The door rumbled open, and they stepped inside. Beneath the forest was a cavern lost to time. The walls were lined with relics, iron daggers, wooden stakes, jars of blessed salt, and scrolls covered in ancient symbols. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone altar, its surface scarred from countless rituals. Gregor turned to the men. "You are standing in the heart of the keepers," he said. "This place has existed since the first generation sealed Aldara beneath the church." Edwin ran a hand over the markings on the altar. "These symbols, they're the same as the ones we found beneath the church." Gregor nodded grimly. "Because this was where she was first cursed." The men fell silent. The truth was darker than any of them had imagined. Gregor took a tattered book from the altar and opened it. "These are the last records of Father Aldrich, the first priest who sealed Aldara away." He turned to a particular passage, his voice heavy with unease. "We did not simply bury her beneath the church. That would not have been enough. She was too strong, too full of hate. So we made a bargain, a trade, one life and for another." The men looked at each other, their skin crawling. "A sacrifice?" Edwin whispered. Gregor nodded. "Every time the seal weakened, the keepers had to offer a life to strengthen it again." The words hung in the air like a curse.